what I realized is that we were so darn diversified. We weren't really doing any one of the things really well.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick, and in the studio we have a special guest, Andrew Mefferd from Growing for Market magazine and the author of the Greenhouse and Hoop House Growers Handbook, which I believe is a required reading if you're even thinking about having a hoop house. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Pleasure to be here.
Long way. We have Randy Cummings from Bootstrap Farmer. Hello, Randy.
I think having Andrew, Nick, and I in the same room has been many years overdue.
Right.
A long history with the three of us from different angles. So I'm excited to get us all in the same room and catch up.
Yeah, for sure. And my co-host, Kari.
Hello.
Hello, Kari.
Hello.
All right. So as to Randy said, in 2016, when I first started doing farmer interviews, Andrew was my very first interview that I actually did on camera. You can see we're still not in a big hurry to get things going and working through technical stuff. But I really think, and I've often thought that interview went, like I was worried about it, right? Because this was whenever I was on the road and was going to do all these interviews for the first time, running cameras for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then having started with you, which we had done some stuff at a few conferences together. So we knew each other fairly well. And I went up to Cornville. So I was really the first time I was on the road, 1,800 miles away from the house. First interview went great. And I think that had that not gone so well, that my farming interview trajectory would have been much different. So thanks for making that easy back in the day.
Yeah, well, that's so much fun. I didn't even realize that we were your first interview at that time. That was great.
Yeah.
I remember talking to you, and you interviewed my wife and partner in crime, Ann.
Right.
And so how about this? Let's not let it go another 8 years before we do this again, okay?
Agreed. And
All right.
we still need to get together and do the boiling of the maple syrup. I keep threatening to come up every year to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know you have a standing invitation. Yeah, I feel like same. It's probably been about 8 or 10 years since I've been saying I'd come down here and see what you're doing in Texas. So, all right, now I'm here. You gotta come up to Maine in February.
Yeah, we'll switch it off.
It's Valentine's Day is around the time that the sap starts running. Everybody wants to be in Maine in
It's a
mid-February.
loaded statement, isn't it?
So come on up.
So, well, and so Randy, to your point again, the three of us have known each other long before Bootstrap Farmer was even in existence, and we've been, the same conferences that we met at, we're all there together. So yeah, this is a long one.
Yep. And Andrew and I used to work at Johnny's. I can't remember when I started there, if it was 2011. Andrew was the tomato obsessive.
And that was the first
product
time I
manager.
actually met him. Was when I was up at the trial farm having issues with my tomatoes, and one 30-minute conversation. Again, you changed the trajectory of my interview career, but you also changed immediately the trajectory of the success of our tomato greenhouse. So owe you a lot.
Well, I'm glad that you were having that problem with your tomatoes, because otherwise we might not have met.
Yeah, and I unfairly, get to go to the Johnny's greenhouse or the trial farm back in the day. I know most farmers don't, so that was a very unique experience. I'm sure we could hash out like old stuff all day long, but we will spare everybody the nostalgia. What I want to talk to you both today, both been in the industry a long time, worldwide traveler. Both of you have been on most likely thousands of farms at this point. We've all gone and seen and done a lot. Farming is in, to me, multiple different realms of upticks, depending on why people are getting into farming. But if we're looking at market gardening specifically, I think we're at a time where it was already on an up. We had the farm to table movement was kind of in full swing. COVID knocked that down a peg, but it also changed market gardening and the way people did sales channels and all that. And now that we're post-pandemic, I think we have a bunch of new farmers, or farmers that have just been in this 18 to 36 months. They're into their third season. Carl, who will be here in a little bit, is a prime example of starting about then. And I want to get your seasoned opinions on where you think small farming is going. So I have some general outlines that I want to cover, and I just want to bounce these ideas off of you. First obvious one is we're going into 2024. We have a lot of technology kind of advances coming on. There's more online presence. There's more apps for data collection. There's more apps for sales channels and getting in touch with your customer and doing video production and things like that. So it's from an online presence situation and beyond just taking credit cards, but actually managing your inventory and tracking customer data and being able to email the customers things that are going on in the farm and keeping them in a newsletter and maybe tagging on some email marketing for all that. What are some things, and especially you being the editor for Growing for Market magazine, I'm sure this is coming up more and more on your side. So I'm going to kick it off to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. Well, I think that if anything good did come out of the pandemic, one of it was that a lot of smaller farmers that didn't have an online presence, it forced them to get online ordering and online payments and things like that. And I think that's something that nobody's gone back from, right? Nobody who went to the trouble of setting up an online store, online payments during the pandemic, nobody has turned those off now, right? And so I think that's really important because it means that farmers were able to reach new customers, right? Let's say somebody who before was maybe just going to a farmer's market. I still feel like farmers markets are the bedrock and the bread and butter of local farming. But we've also got to be real that there's only a very small part of the population that's ever going to go to a farmer's market. Not that we shouldn't try to grow that, but I know when I was younger and selling at farmers markets, I was a huge farmers market cheerleader, and I felt like it was a matter of marketing. It's like we just have to reach everybody and tell them how great the farmers market is, and eventually we'll get everybody out of the farmers market.
We don't want everybody there. They're just clogging up the aisles.
Well, I mean, presumably, if we could get everybody to go, then we'd have more farmers markets, which we've actually seen. You probably know the USDA keeps track of how many farmers markets there are. In the period from, don't quote me on this, but it's roughly the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. So the time when you had the real locavore movement going on and being promoted, there was a huge growth of farmers markets, which has leveled off. It hasn't, I think it's still going up a little bit, but unless you can get more and more people coming to the farmers markets, it's really just, if you're not getting more customers and you keep starting more markets, you're just cutting up the slices of the pie smaller and smaller.
Well, and can we say that a farmer's market is just like any other business entity in that some of them are mismanaged and some of them do things extremely well, and some attract other vendors that are obviously going to rise and be the cream of the crop. So even just because we have more farmers markets doesn't necessarily mean it's a level playing field or even something worth going to if it's not ran properly.
Right. Well, there's that, and there's also just there's life gets in the way too, and that's one thing that I didn't think about as much when I was younger. But now I've got kids, and sometimes we're doing soccer for a whole season, right? And so maybe the farmers market's on Saturday mornings, and we have soccer games on Saturday mornings for a whole 3-month stretch, right? And so even beyond the fact that not everybody is just going to go to the farmers market in the first place. Not everybody's even available who might, I might want to go to the farmer's market, but I got to do soccer games on Saturday mornings. And so I think it's really important to be able to buy local food from other places, meet the customer where they're at, to make sure that if a person wants to buy local food, that they can get it, even if they can't make it to the farmer's market. And so that's why I think it is really promising, all the online ordering. You got things like Local Line. We've got these Reco Ring things, which I don't even know how to describe it, but it's almost like an online buying club. But it just seems like a really good thing to continue the momentum of local foods has been the proliferation of different ways to buy them, right? So that the farmer's market or CSA isn't the only way, because we know, as much as we want to promote those channels of farmers markets and CSAs, not every single person is going to be going to the farmers market or joining a CSA. So I think that's a really good, a good thing about the pandemic in a way is that it forced farmers during that period when farmers markets were shut down. It forced them to, set up that online ordering and has now opened sales channels to a lot of farms that probably weren't there before.
Randy, when you were doing farm tours, I'm sure you came across some early adopters of some of these types of ways to do business. Was there any lessons that you had from back at that time, and we're talking, 6-7 years ago, of people that were doing something significant and different at the time, and you kind of saw their upward trajectory, and now that you've had the convenience of being able to watch these folks over several years through all the stuff that we're talking about, where are they at now, and how do you feel that went?
Sure. So I think it's the ones that did well were the customers that were going to market and collecting CSA signups at market, right? So you've got someone that might show up today, but they're not necessarily going to show up to market next week or 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. And so the folks that did a great job branding their farm at market and having a memorable logo and answering a couple questions and capturing that customer while they were standing at the booth, that's what helped them kind of move forward. I think it's interesting when we look at the pandemic, how many farms didn't make it. The ones that didn't make it were not diversified in either their product or their customer base or how they were serving their customer. So an example is some of these big microgreen operations that were only selling to Cisco and only selling to restaurants. When the restaurants weren't open, their customer base dried up and they didn't make it. The ones that did make it were the ones that were going to market and doing customer deliveries and having on-farm pickup and things like that. But I think you brought up a really interesting point, Andrew, of not everybody goes to market. So how do you capture some of that? And I think that online ordering is a huge piece of it. When you look at the majority of the population or a big percentage of the population, a lot of them are doing grocery store curbside pickup now. I know hectic lifestyle, probably 75% of the time I'm pre-ordering my groceries and they're bringing it out to my car. So when we're living in an environment in 2024 where so many people are doing curbside at the grocery store, what are the chances that that person is going to go out on a Saturday morning and buy carrots from this vendor and tomatoes from that vendor and beef from another vendor? So how can we consolidate that or make that as easy as we can for the customer to shop when the last few years they've been groomed for that convenience of the curbside pickup, right?
So, Kari, you actively and go out of your way to support local. You're at the market virtually every weekend. As things have changed over the years, are you going to see what they have beforehand? Like, how are you shopping as a buyer for local? I know you and I check the bakery menu every day, but and we just hope they post, but we're going to go anyway. But
yeah, I mean, I like Instagram. Like, I'll check out Instagram a lot, especially like with Carl. Like, I've started following him on Instagram, and kind of see what they're going to have ahead of time. But I'm still probably gonna, unless I have a soccer game, I'm gonna go to farmers market. But also we've got our local grocery that has started, Paris Grocery, and that's really nice to just know that there's always going to be something there. And I think I said this last time talking to Carl, like sometimes I don't even really pay 100% attention to necessarily what I'm getting. Because my husband does the cooking. It's amazing. It's great. I kind of just get the local stuff and then let him figure out what to do with it.
Iron Chef.
It's kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, I tend to just I like just going to farmers market and walking around, even if I don't have anything in particular I'm looking for that day. I just I like people watching too. So
The farmers
enjoy
market
doing
is great
that.
for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing that we get hit up on, it seems to be weekly, is another farmer has developed another app to track data, or there's we get hit up a lot to be on this podcast about their apps, and I'm frankly not going to talk about it just because there's so much, and I need to see stuff proven out over several years before we're going to just throw something out there. But is there anything that you feel is not out there that needs to be out there from a technology standpoint?
So like a space that I'm looking for somebody to fill on the technology side of things.
My reservation against apps is I think farmers are going to schedule things out the way that they are comfortable doing it. Some people are on spreadsheets, some people are on pen and paper, some people are pretty willy-nilly about it. And just because an app is out there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be widely adopted, given that everybody's grow and their market is so vastly different that I have a hard time thinking that apps are going to be a one-stop solution for farmers in general. And so I like the fact that as we're doing credit card sales and stuff like that, that more and more people are starting to pick up on email marketing from that particular standpoint. Like, hey, it's going to snow and it's going to rain, or we're going to skip the market, even though I don't think that's a good business practice. I think you still need to go. But hey, we are planting carrots now, so in 6 months, these things are going to be available, and you're driving home the price that these things are not just showing up magically, and this thing takes time and effort. I like for farmers to be able to tell that long-term story, and hey, this is going to be at the market, or hey, we're going to partner up with somebody at the market and look for those advantages. But I don't see, beyond doing more marketing, any reason to do any other stuff at this point, especially from a scheduling standpoint.
Right. Could be due to lack of creativity, but I can't think of anything that needs to be filled. Although, from an app standpoint, on the other hand, that's not the thing that I spend most of my time thinking about. And I guess I'll say that most of the things, as far as ways for farmers to do online transactions and reach people and make it easy for people to browse their products, put in an order either from one single farm or even order from a group of farms. I feel like that stuff is there. And sometimes things will crop up that I didn't even think of. And so I feel like the obvious gaps as far as online ordering and things like that are being filled. So an example of that. So right before I was here, I was at the lovely Utah Farm and Food Conference in Cedar City, Utah. And there was a guy there who had an app actually. I don't know if you guys know what a Reco ring is, but it's this thing, that was developed in somewhere in Scandinavia. I want to say Norway, but it was originally this way that people. It was like a almost like a buying club, an ordering group where you could order from a group of farms through Facebook, and then so you could put in an order with Farmer Jane for eggs and Farmer Bob for carrots and Farmer Bill for beef, all separately, and they come and drop off at the same place. Right. So essentially, it simplifies ordering from 3 different people, and they're all going to be there at the same time. But it was kind of clunky because it was through Facebook. It was using a social media platform to do ordering.
When you're also trying to rally multiple farms to all meet at the same point at the same time, and that's always a challenge.
Right. And so, in fact, I heard about that. In fact, I did an interview with a woman in Norway, and we had an article in Growing for Market magazine. I think it was back during the pandemic, talking about that. And so, it never occurred to me to turn that into an app. I know you said we're not going to talk about apps, so, but this is just an example of something that I never would have thought of,
Right.
because I guess that's not where I put my time. But someone's made an app now to essentially do that. I mean, and farmers make a group. They could make, like, a group of farmers here in Paris, Texas could make a
Don't we have one
Reco.
now?
We have one.
All
I'm
right.
not sure if it's still 100% operational because it is so clunky and hard on that platform. Made it very hard because I ordered from it a couple times. I had a friend who was part of it, and she's not doing it anymore. It was just clunky and hard to manage.
Well, so this is an example of where this guy that I met at the conference, of course, because he was there. There's a bunch of farmers. It's pretty new. He was there to promote it, of course, the farmers. He has basically made software to facilitate the transaction, so people aren't just doing it through Facebook. So it keeps the original spirit of a Reco ring going, and it just simplifies the transaction. And another thing that I thought was cool about it is that the farmers aren't charged a percentage. It works kind of like almost like a credit card fee, whereas the farmers get the full value of their product, and the customer is charged a percentage based on how much they order, and the percentage goes down, right? So it also incentivizes ordering more from this whole group of farmers. So, but maybe due to lack of creativity, but I feel like a lot of the things that we might have wished for, say 10 years ago, just to simplify online browsing and online ordering from farms is there. And so now probably somebody will come out with something tomorrow.
Oh, for sure.
That's their job, right? Is to figure out how to fill the gaps that are there. But I feel like most of it seems to me like the low-hanging fruit has been picked as far as making it easy. Because if you think about the position that a local farmer, direct market farmer finds themselves in, is that they are trying to reach the same customer base that any big company is trying to reach, right? Is everybody, right? I mean, that's the interesting thing about the food business, is that anybody who eats is your customer, so everybody is your customer. And you're having to compete with food companies with multi-million-dollar marketing budgets, professional advertising, and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I feel like one thing, we won't get hung up on any particular app, but one thing that apps can do for farmers is they can, put some legwork into professionalizing the marketing and the interface and things like that. Whereas, farmers, maybe a few of them know how to code or whatever, but by and large, they want to be doing their farming, right? They don't want to be like setting up a web page and doing payment processing and all that kind of stuff. And so I think, it's a great thing that people are setting these things up, just because it can help farmers professionalize their online sales, essentially.
And that's it. And that spoke to what Kari said a minute ago. If something's clunky and hard to use, they're not going to use it. The tech goes away. People get discouraged. So again, given the seasonality of everything, given that everything could be sold by weight or by volume, like all these different variables go into what we sell. I think if I were to pick an app to deal with, it's going to be, how can I seamlessly market a product to the right kind of people? How can I sell, collect payments, and make sure everybody knows clearly where to pick up, how to deliver, how to pay, all that things. Anything that we can automate from a payment standpoint, because we're all used to ordering online nowadays, and anything that we can do to step into that more professional realm, I think is a good way to go, which kind of brings me to the next thing of consumer trends, which is what I want to talk about next. So if we can solve the ordering situation a little bit better, the demand for organic, and let's remove all the stipulations and certifications around the term organic, and let's think of organic from the regular consumer's mindset, in which I don't know any consumer that goes, is this certified organic? What they're actually looking for and what they're really telling us is, I want local, I want no spray. So for the sake of this conversation, let's leave the certifications out of it and just relax for a second about what all that actually means. And let's talk about this from the consumer's standpoint. That's what we're here for. And so if we're going to think about how can we present ourselves as farmers to these buying audiences, I know a lot of people are getting more media attention. That seems to be one of the feel-good stories, and farmers have this opportunity to promote themselves on social in all forms and factors, whether they're comfortable with it or not. That technology is there and it's available. What are some of the things that you two have seen that have worked particularly well for different farmers that you have either featured in the magazine or have spoken to? And Randy, I mean, basically the same question, but how are farmers getting in front of more people and really making a significant in-person connection or developing that online presence?
I think when we talk about someone's farm, it's a brand just like anything else, right? And I think you and Kari alluded to it earlier, where every day you're checking the bakery menu, and that's part of your ritual, right? And you may have half an hour in your day scattered here and there in little microseconds to see what the bakery's got going on and seeing what a farmer's got going on and this, that, and the other, whatever your hobbies are. And so I think it's interesting when farmers can share a quick post about what's ready at the farm that day. And it humanizes the brand, right? Someone flipping through that social media can see their farmer and see the crop and start thinking about recipes that night and get excited about it. But what I've also seen be very successful is when farms can kind of co-brand with like restaurants, right? So we all may or may not have gone to a restaurant, and instead of just a 12-ounce steak being on the menu, it's a 12-ounce steak from such and such a farm, fresh eggs from such and such a farm. And so when you can collaborate with restaurants and things like that, and your brand comes through and it humanizes where the food came from and that localness, I think that's a big differentiator for helping the customer and the consumer identify that this is fresh food, it's local, it's in my, sphere of influence, whatever. They can feel good about spending their money on that product at that restaurant, at that farm, right?
Yeah, I totally agreed. To kind of double down on that, I know Aaron Benzakein wrote an article for Growing for Market a few years back called, I think it was called "Become the Face of Your Farm," basically encouraging farmers to just put themselves out there a little bit. And I realize that social media isn't everybody's bag, but if farmers are all inclined to do it, I think it really can help build a sense of loyalty, kind of like you were talking about, Randy, to just put a picture of what's like the first of something that's ripe, the first flower of of one that's bloomed, right? Because farming is photogenic, especially flowers, right? I feel like flower growers have discovered this and really use that to their advantage, right? Because that's the whole point of flowers, is to be beautiful, right? And so I think that flower growers are the best example of this, where they've used social media to show people not only what they're growing, how they're growing it, but who's growing it, right? Because if people can see the face behind the flower, or the face behind the produce, that goes even further to be like, I want that beautiful flower, or I want that beautiful, head of broccoli. But it also, goes an extra mile to make people feel good about supporting the person behind it. And so, I mean, flower growers I want to make sure we talk about flower growers. Two reasons: because they've always been an important part of farmers markets, but also because flowers are having a real growth spurt right now. Flowers have always been important at farmers markets, but it seems like the local flower movement is having, I don't want to call it a moment, because I think it's more than a moment. I sure hope it's more than just a moment. I think we're seeing growth in local flowers right now, the way we saw growth in local foods, maybe a decade ago with the local food locavore movement. So I know that a lot of flower growers actually make sales through Instagram to wholesalers, and I think they've also found ways to make sales to just get people interested in what they have, even individual consumers. Because I say that's what the business that we're in is, the direct market farming, and farmers who are selling through farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, and I include local wholesaling in there, right? Because it's a whole different thing to be taking stuff down to a local grocery store, which is still wholesaling, than to be, like loading pallets on a truck and you have no idea who the end consumer is. And that's where a lot of grocery stores have started putting the farm name on the produce. And so that's where I think that if farmers are all inclined to do that, if they can just take a few minutes, take a picture of what they're growing, and kind of tease it out there, right? That also helps people, because I think, like, let's just face it, it's like 1% of the population that's doing farming, right? People, by and large, people have a bad idea of seasonality, when things are ripe and when they're going to be ready. And so I think they can post their crops as they're coming along, and then people will know, like, oh, right, there aren't any tomatoes at the farmer's yet because it's March in Maine, and the tomatoes are 6 inches tall or whatever.
And this, what I would like to see farmers to kind of take more ownership of is stopping to figure out ways to talk to their people on a more one-to-one methodology, in that I would love to see a farmer not be behind the stand, but like get in front of the stand and have a little sign that says, ask me about your local food. And so while that one particular farmer at one particular city may not have a big impact, if everybody listening to this did, and all of a sudden you have a couple hundred or a few thousand people next weekend go, ask me about my local food, and then they can ask those questions and start getting some of the misconceptions out of the way. We talked yesterday about an article that was wrote in the seed industry, and it was wrong. And even though there was a redaction, that is still floating out there in space and causing trouble for some seed companies and us as farmers in general. And we're talking about a misquote about GMO seeds way back in the day.
And I think it's one thing to talk about when we're covering this, this topic of marketing. And don't get me wrong, farming to succeed, farming is a hard business to get into. And we're asking a lot. We're asking a farmer to be good at growing. We're asking a farmer to be an accountant and good at bookkeeping. We're asking a farmer to be potentially a mechanic, a welder.
Oh, you're going to be some mechanicing.
So there's, a nutritionist, and now we throw marketing team on top of that, right? And it's tough to be able to wear all of those hats when there's only so much time in the day. And some of these things aren't our forte, right? We talk about sending your most charismatic person to the farmer's market, because ultimately they're going to pull people into the booth and sell more product. So don't sell the grouchy guy who's great at growing. Send the charismatic person that's good at selling, right?
Even if that's a temporary hired, or not temporary, but hey, on the weekends, I need somebody to go act as the voice of the farm.
Sure.
If the farmer doesn't want it, I need a salesperson, and that any company selling any product has a dedicated sales team that is not necessarily practicing the art of farming, but practicing the art of, I need to move.
Let's boil it down to knowing that there's a lot of farms, small scale farms, that don't have any labor. Somebody might work a 9-to-5 job and then farm on the side, or one person in the household farms, one person has a 9-to-5. But there are some that can realize there's not enough time in the day, and they can sell more product if they hire someone to help pick the crop, or pick, pack, and ship, or hire a delivery driver. And I think it's important that we step back a little bit and say, okay, if you're willing to hire someone a few hours a week to do deliveries for your farm, consider hiring someone a few hours a week to do your marketing, to post to social media, to create that reel, or send that email to the customer base. Because at the end of the day, you can be the best grower in the world, but if no one's buying your product, then you're done. So how do we prioritize that marketing in that list, that laundry list of things that need to get done
and that,
on the farm, right?
That could be something as simple as subcontracting out a photographer 4 times a year with the season. What a professional photographer can give you in a couple of hours for just like a regular studio session rate, but they come out to the farm and do everything that they do and do well. And the deliverables are going to basically take care of your social media posts for the year, it's money well spent because you're not having to think about it like all the time, what you're going to post and that kind of thing. Kari, I'm interested, like, in all the buying that you've ever done. Was there any instance that kind of comes to mind that changed the way you thought about local food and how you interacted with it?
Yeah, like starting to go to Paris Bakery, like you mentioned it earlier, when the restaurant and the grower work together.
Mhm.
I get more excited, even though I love eating at Paris Bakery anyways. I get more excited when now it's, they have Paris Natural Farms or Black Sage Farm, like whoever they've partnered with at that time. So the more I've seen, like the more visible farmers have gotten, because it is like a really, really hard job. And even until like starting to work here at Bootstrap, really starting to see more of what everybody's going through just keeps driving in that it's important to support the locals. But to your question, like going to Paris Bakery and how much more excited I get when they are using the locals, or now that the grocery store is open and I can easily buy from the locals. It's just, and starting to take my son to farmers market. The first time we went to farmers market together was just, he was excited. He was running around because he is a people person. Like, I just like watching the people. He likes interacting with the people. So getting to go to farmers market and seeing him start to learn about local food has been really exciting.
Is there an event that either one of you have witnessed or been a part of and gone to and thought, man, this farmer has really figured out how to explain to a lot of people all at once? Yeah, I'm thinking mainly about farm to table dinner kind of things, or perhaps at a conference where somebody was so able to tell their story that it impacted the crowd.
Well, I guess I'll say I haven't been to a whole lot of farm to table dinners. I love them, but I think that as far as communicating with your buying public, probably the most effective thing that I can think of is just having good signage at farmers market, right? Because we say people aren't going to buy something if they don't know how much it costs. And if like sometimes Annie and I joke and call, the kind of food that we're into is adjective laden food, organic, pasture raised, local, whatever it is. Like, probably if you're in this business, there are some adjectives that you can apply to your food, right? And so at least it's got to have a price. But if all it is a price, you're probably leaving out part of the story. And that's where, you could just make cards even that just say, if it's organic or naturally grown or pasture raised, or whatever the attribute that moved you to grow this thing, pass that on to the customer, right? Because those are really the people. Like, I mean, farm to table dinners are great, all that kind of stuff is great, but I think that just the retail politics, in a way, making the point to your customer who's right in front of you, deciding whether to buy something from you or not, and you don't even have to tell them about it, right? Because that's the point.
And if you're a great grower, your booth is going to be busy, and you probably won't have time to talk to everybody.
Well, exactly. So that's where great signage, I think, great signage helps farmers be great, because then they don't have to, if they take the time up front to make good signs, then the stuff kind of sells itself, rather than having to, because maybe if somebody has a question, maybe 1 out of 10 is going to ask that question there at farmers market, but 9 people aren't, and they're just going to move on to somebody else's booth. So I think good signage, when we're talking about retail selling, good signage is like the biggest thing that growers can do.
Well, let's take the next step, right? Okay, so you have good signage, you have great produce, people know that you're there. Let's say you've done everything right, and then it's all going to come to a slamming halt if this desk was my booth at market and the cash register is in the middle, and every farmer's market has a natural flow. And if people are naturally coming this way and the checkout is here and they're going to have to go around and get this and pick that, and just like a grocery store, like everybody complains every now and then Walmart completely changes the whole store 180 degrees and nobody can find anything. But if at a farmer's market you had this natural flow of, I get this and I get that and I get this and I check out and I'm on my way, and it's not impeding the other vendors, it's not impeding the flow of traffic at the market. You really have to stop what you're doing or have somebody do that for you and be like, just observe not only our booth and where the hangups are, but like, how is this in relationship to the other market, booth placement, that kind of thing. I don't think a lot of people fully think that out. And even some dear people I love to death, just it's hard to shop at their booth because you've got Gertie coming in over here and elbowing her way off in the middle of everything. You're trying to wait in some kind of imaginary line that you think is possible. You have to create these natural flows within your booth.
Yep.
Yeah.
And someone else wants to have a question about, purple carrots, and there's a story behind that. And so but I think there's two opportunities here, and signage being one of them, and then the other is having your logo, whether that's on your tablecloth or your banner, or the bag, or a business card or something that identifies your farm. You might not have 10 minutes to tell your farm story to every person at the booth, but if they can walk away from your booth and find you the following week because they recognize the color of your logo or your business name, or they say, where are you located? And you tell them this town, or they've got that logo that they can then go back and check out your website and say, oh, here's the farm story. And they fall in love with your farm and what you're doing. And then they make it a point to come back, or they follow you on social and they see that you're posting carrots are ready, radishes are ready, so on and so forth. So half of that opportunity is the signage at the booth. And then the other half is, how does that person that buys from you and walks away, how do you tie them back to your farm for another purchase in the future?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point, because we know farmers are buying twist ties, they're buying bags, they're buying boxes, they're buying whatever containers they're using to package their product anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
It only takes us a little bit more effort. So hopefully you have a logo. So, to get a logo designed, if you don't have one, and then buy some customized twist ties, or buy customized packaging, because it doesn't cost that much more. It does take a little bit of extra effort because you have to order it up front. But once you've done it one time, you're just reordering, because you're exactly right. Then people are looking at your logo at home,
Right.
And it's good, right? Because it's fresher. It probably tastes better than what's in the grocery store. It's better for them and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, that's a really good point, is that it's a little bit more effort, helps to make that connection for people, when they're not even at your stand anymore, and can help them come back.
Well, there's so many lessons that we can learn from grocery stores. And if we're talking about the signage, and if we're talking about the flow, think about what else happens at the cashier. You're now in front of all this little things you didn't go to the store to buy, and it's all high margin, high markup items. And I'm forever complaining about everything, but more in particular, you always hear in some basic level farmers market stuff, well, we'll have recipe cards. Yeah, okay. Well, why don't you put those in a seasonal book that are going to answer the majority of the questions that you may not have time to answer anyway? A local print shop is going to be able to spiral bound that, and now you have a recipe book that tells your farm story. That's a physical thing that you can put in their kitchen. So every time they're in their kitchen, you have this little reminder. You also have the opportunity to go to, you could go get cup towels made with your farm's logo on it. And people love little towels and little kitchen things like that, or a hot plate cover with your farm's logo that is cost you $2-3 to have produced. It gives somebody something to buy. People that come to the farmer's market want to support you in all the ways, or else they wouldn't be there. So if you give them something else to buy, especially a high margin item that can be logoed, and then to your point, every time they turn around their kitchen, it's your farm logo, or a resource for them that they can go back to. There's no reason to just give stuff away. People aren't giving magazines away at the grocery store. People are, if you have an opportunity through a cottage law to make a little snack that people can also pick up, or a little drink, or even on the hottest of hot days, just having bottled water for sale at the end. It's all stuff that regular stores do, and there's a reason that's at that particular location. The little tote bags with your logo on there, sell them. I mean, the grocery stores do, because there's no reason to just give stuff away whenever you have an opportunity to make it just a little bit nicer with your logo on it.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought up about the recipes, Nick, because I know, I mean, most farmers find themselves in this position where at some point they have a glut of something, either a crop, like just the weather or whatever did really well that year, or maybe you grew a wholesale amount and then the wholesaler backed out on you or something like that. I know that when we've had too much of something, there's nothing like giving a recipe away, right? Because we also remember not everybody is a great cook or knows how to cook with everything, right? And so maybe people aren't familiar with leeks, and then you've got too many leeks. And so yeah, if you give a leek recipe away, I can almost guarantee you're going to sell way more leeks than you normally would. In fact, at Growing for Market, one thing that comes free with the Growing for Market subscription that I didn't think about talking about today until you just mentioned it is there's a book called Farm Fresh Recipes. So people can actually buy it through our website. It's cheap as an ebook. It's free with a Growing for Market subscription, and like most recipes, they're not copyrighted, right? So the whole idea is it gives people a whole book. If they don't have time to put together their own, whatever farm recipe book, they can just take these recipes and all with fresh produce and just print them off and give them away to their customers. And so, that is a great strategy. And one thing, once again, just thinking about Growing for Market content, and something you said a minute ago about flow at market, Nick, there's a few different ways to set up good flow, right? It's not like good flow is really important, right? Because you don't want one line coming in and butting up against the line that's trying to come at your cash register, right? But there's more than one way to do that. There's U-shaped setup, there's straight pass-through setups. And so if you remind me, Nick, we just had an article within the last year or two about a few different ways to design your booth setup so that it has good flow. And if you remind me, I will be happy to make that article public and give you a link that you can share in the notes.
So you remind her, and you remind me, and we'll all remind each other.
Remind somebody.
Yeah, somebody reminds somebody, and because there is a little bit of an art. It's like there's a few different ways, and I didn't write the article, and I'm not the expert on it, but there's a few different ways. Depending on your goals and like the kind of stand you have, there's a few different ways to set up your stand for good flow, and I'd be happy to make that public through show notes. And
this is stuff that big companies spend millions of dollars to pay people to go and observe and play around on CAD designs. Like, nothing in these stores is by chance. Every square inch is dialed in for maximum selling. And if they've already done the work, all it takes is for a farmer you have to go to a store very purposefully to go, I'm just going to spend the day going to all these different stores and seeing what works and what doesn't, what I like and what I don't, and be able to extrapolate what you think is most important.
I think it's important for folks that are taking notes, from this conversation. We're not necessarily recommending the signage that says "take a leak." That might not be advisable for market, but
I want to retire all of these farm memes. It's dry, like, as a man. All right, I want to get back to your point, but this constant resharing of that same scarecrow in the field, we've got to just be a little bit more creative as farmers. Quit sharing other people's photos. Get your own photo. Still do the memes, and you can still. But come on, just make it a little better. Make it your own. Make it something that if somebody sees it, they know it's you, and not just some fuzzy picture you've screenshotted off the internet.
Oh, that was it.
I'll say to the point of like making sure you have good signage. Last weekend at Farmer's Market, I went and there was a booth that has very little signage. I don't think she even has everything priced, but you said it earlier. She had somebody who was asking her a question about every single thing. Like, what is this? And how much is this? What is this? And I got tired of waiting and I went to the next booth. I did end up going back and getting something when she was less busy, but not everybody is going to come back. So if you have somebody who keeps having to ask you all these questions, you're going to lose people who, I'm just going to go to the next booth.
Well, and you're creating frustration. I'm sure the farmer's frustrated. Why do I got to answer this again? Well, because you don't have a sign. But that person was probably frustrated. The owner's frustrated. You're frustrated. If people are now starting to build up and create flow problems for the next person, the next vendor could be, because at our markets, I mean, some of these people really go all out. and they've got it figured out. And oftentimes they're right next to somebody that doesn't have a sign, and you're creating barriers for somebody, and it's just, you can't make it work. They're already stopping what they're doing and coming on this Saturday that's filled with stuff. And if you make it harder and there's all these other vendors to go to, they're going to skip you. And you can't get mad that nobody's supporting you if you're not supporting yourself in that you're taking some of these steps. And nothing that we're talking about here is like outlandish or crazy. It takes a little bit of time, but often you got to do it once and you have it figured out for the rest of your farming career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the rule, I can't remember, I said it before, but the rule that we have for farmers market is if somebody asks you, make a sign, right? Because if one person asks, 9 other people have wondered.
And maybe get somebody's opinion on that, because it's like, even if you make a sign, it needs to be understood by somebody that's not in your world. Like I am so befuddled that at Bootstrap Farmer, we still get, how many's in a 2-pack? I mean, I don't know what else we could say. This is a pack of 2. There is 2 of these things in a 2. It's a 2-pack.
I literally had that conversation this morning.
It's daily. It's daily. Like if anybody is listening to this and you want to improve Bootstrap Farmer, and we're selling, I don't know, 2 of these pins, that's a 2-pack to me and everybody else here, and to like 98% of the people also buying. But if there's something we can do to improve, please comment below. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, people are not in touch with agriculture anymore. And I've heard of like celosia. People asking whether celosia is a vegetable or a flower. It's this kind of like wild. There's probably somebody listening to this who doesn't know what celosia is, and so it's kind of a wild looking flower. And so like, if you didn't know, maybe you don't know if it's a vegetable or a flower. It's like it's a flower. You're supposed to look at it, not eat it.
I'm glad you said that, because it reminded me to also harp on things that grocery stores do. What's in most of the grocery stores? A whole floral department. And so if we're thinking about, well, how can we add value to the farm? Throwing a few flowering perennials out, and especially like woody stem herbs that are going to come back again every year that you don't have to constantly replant. A few sprigs of that at the market. It's almost a non-issue that you're going to sell something, especially if maybe you don't have a whole floral set up on your farm, but a little hand bouquet at the market that is designed for, there's not a dad out there that's not going to buy his daughter a little hand bouquet to walk around the market. It's an easy item to sell. You'll always sell out. It's a no-brainer. And it doesn't take that much time away from the farm, especially if you're saying to yourself, I'm going to charge more for this. This is going to be a 100% markup item, or whatever you have into it. Just knowing that I'm going to price this a little higher. I'm only going to take 10. If they don't, I'm actually farming this because it's a perennial or it's just a few snips. Make it part of your routine that's not difficult to do on the farm before you go out. And if we also go back to the grocery store, we're looking at, there's produce managers, there is the butcher, there's the floral, there's customer service. All of these things have to have some level of coverage at your farmer's market or wherever you're selling. And so going to the farmer's market solo and being all of those people all the time is very, very difficult. I mean, that's why I like the idea that you had earlier about just hiring somebody to be a sales manager at the farmer's market and having a cashier, a dedicated cashier. All that person does is check people out, and then you're able to cycle through more and more and more. It's going to pay for itself.
Mm-hmm. And part of it is also just knowing what your strengths are. I know some people who spend all week on the farm, and then going to market is like their chance to interact with people for the week. It's going to town, right? Whereas I know some people who are more like dirt under the fingernails. I relate better to plants than I do to people types that would probably be a lot better off hiring somebody else to do it. Or I remember like on one farm in particular that we apprenticed on, the farmers sent us to market, and they told us, don't wear your dirty farm clothes to the market. Wear a nice shirt, take a shower the night before, and all that kind of stuff, because it does. People want to see their produce in a clean environment and to be dealt with by a nice, friendly person. And so that's one of the realities of small farming, direct market farming, whatever you want to call it, is that the farmer is going to wear a lot of hats, and just ideally, maybe there are definitely some really small operations where the farmer is the only person, or the farmer and their partner. A lot of operations like that where they just by default have to wear all the hats. But I think people got to realize, especially as they scale up, think about what they are good at and think about what they really like doing, right? Because especially as your farm grows, just realize you can delegate. And so if it's exhausting to you to go to market and answer everybody's questions all day long of like how many are in a 2-pack or whatever, then maybe hire somebody that's all they do. Maybe it's a high school kid or somebody who really likes interacting with people to run your farm stand, so you can be back doing something else, or even God forbid taking a break on a Saturday, right? Yeah, because I mean, kind of like I feel like one thing we've been dancing around a little bit here is that our competition as direct market farmers is multi-million, if not multi-billion-dollar corporations. And so I think one reality of small farming that's important to point out is that direct market farmers are at a disadvantage off the bat. And a lot of that comes just from the subsidy system that we have here in the United States. There's billions of dollars that go in payments to farmers of the biggest farmers of the most widely grown crops. And the way that puts local farmers at a disadvantage is because when the raw materials, essentially the raw materials for junk food, or all the raw materials of processed foods, let's say, are subsidized, that means that the raw materials for the alternative to eating a fruit or a vegetable are cheaper than market prices in many points, right? Because that's what happens is that basically, the big farmers of corn and soy, we all know that processed foods like corn or soy is the raw material for most of the processed foods, right? If you look at any processed food, probably corn syrup, there's corn ingredients in there, there's soy ingredients in there, right? So basically the big huge, when somebody's trying to decide, am I going to eat a fruit or vegetable, or am I going to eat processed foods? Unfortunately, people who don't have enough money for food end up choosing processed foods because because of the subsidy system, a calorie of processed foods is going to tend to be a lot cheaper than a calorie from a fruit or vegetable. And so I think people are starting to vote with their dollars in a way. People are buying fruits and vegetables more, partially because we know how good fruits and vegetables are for us, and a lot of people are probably familiar with the acronym for the Standard American Diet, right? It's SAD. SAD is the Standard American Diet. And if you've looked at the health statistics in this country, basically all the health problems have been on a steep upward trend, just because people are eating more and more processed foods. And so that just puts like local growers at a disadvantage off the bat, because it makes their products just look more expensive compared to processed foods. And there's a similar thing actually going on the flour side too. There's a flour production in Central America is subsidized partially due to the war on drugs. The idea was they subsidize flours coming from Central America. The idea being, then people can get jobs in Central America in the floral industry instead of growing cocaine or whatever. And I'm not sure how well that's worked out, but there was a huge number of bankruptcies in the flour industry in the 80s and 90s when those subsidies came into being, because the flours that were being flown in were being subsidized. So that's why there's a hashtag in the flour industry, flown or grown, not flown. I don't have the answer for all that, because it's not enough. I mean, obviously there has been a huge growth in the local foods movement. It's not enough. It's not like, I'm not so optimistic that I'm like, if everyone just buys local, then those subsidies are just going to go away. But it is a reality that we have to acknowledge, that in addition to not having marketing departments and wearing all those hats, local growers are at a disadvantage, just because the alternative to locally grown fruits and vegetables is so much cheaper because of those subsidies. So I think there has to be, at some point, I hope there's some political movement, because I think, the average American has such little understanding of agriculture. They think it's something like, it's almost like insurance, whereas it's not. There's a whole other program of crop insurance that is to help protect farmers from bad weather or whatever would ruin their crops. And so, we're basically just pouring tons of money into junk food. I think there has to be a political solution. I'm not, I unfortunately I don't have it. I'm not running for politics, and I know there's a lot of politicians that are opposed to it, but I think there's also a lot of support for it because it's essentially a pass-through subsidy. A lot of that money goes to chemical companies and machinery companies. It's essentially they're giving money to farmers to pass it on to chemical companies and machinery companies that are going to sell the chemicals and machines that make it possible to farm such large acreages with such little human input. I mean, that's how we got to the point where less than 1% of the population is farming. But it just has to be acknowledged. Say the big companies that have all those resources do not. And so that might be just something for people to keep in mind. Like, you're doing a really hard job. You're basically as a local grower, you're a salmon swimming upstream. And so that's where people could just be aware of that and try to make a change. Because I realize those subsidies can't just go away overnight, right? Our whole farming system has been built around them. I think it would be great if we could find some way to, gradually wean off the subsidies, reduce them by 10% a year for 10 years or something like that, and eventually they're gone. Because that, to my mind, that would largely level the playing field, right? Is then at least, it's not like processed foods would go away because we eliminated agricultural subsidies, but at least the true cost of the corn and soy that all the processed food is made of would be paid instead of the government making those foods artificially cheap.
So
but
if I could give a counterpoint to all that. So
please do.
Earlier in the podcast, you said something about, everybody is our client. And I kind of had a visceral reaction because I fundamentally think it's the complete opposite of that. And all the disadvantages that you just spoke of in the subsidies, I think that's our true advantage if we lean into it. Because what I'm not going to do is sit around and wait for any policy or any change or any law or whatever a corn farmer is going to get. I'm not going to let that affect our business and what we're doing. And so if I take a look at the population and I go, hey, 98% of the people don't care about what we're doing, food is not an option for them from an expense or a quality of life, or this is not their entertainment. I want that 2% that does care. I want the Karis of the world that's like, I want somebody that actively pays attention to what's going into their body, actively pays attention to what is being grown and where it's coming from. And I want to be their beacon out there to go, look, I'm here. I understand that food is, top 3 of the most important thing in your life. And I want to lean into that. And I wish all small farmers would, because I really think as the generations get thinned out a little bit and we have younger and younger folks coming online that are just sick of the way they were raised and the way they grew up, and they want something different, and they are tired of all their friends being obese. I think that there's change out there to be had and be capitalized on if we take responsibility to look at our farmer's booth and from an objective standpoint goes, how can I make my booth better this week? And how can I make it better this week, the next week following that? And how can I leverage social media or email marketing or going out and pressing palms and doing it one by one to go, you can do a handful of changes to make a significant impact on your bottom line. And you didn't need the governor's permission to do that. You're not getting money taken away from your pocket from a subsidy. You're taking responsibility to go, how can I make my business better? And what can I use from all these other people who have spent all these billions of dollars in marketing and tactics and advertising and understanding, and how can I just take a little sliver of that because I know it works and tell my message through that and to make my booth better. So I think it is a big advantage, because if this is the norm, you got that little sliver of people that don't want the norm anymore, and that's who we go after. So that notion of they're not.
I think a lot of one of the things that made a lot of local farmers or direct market farmers, however you want to say it, made them into what they are is because they're independent, have an independent mindset. Yeah, they're not looking for the government to come solve their problems. They're going to go do it themselves. And that's why I don't say like, oh, the answer to government subsidies is subsidizing organic or subsidizing local. No, I personally want subsidies to go away, but there also is that thing, you're right, of local growers just going out and making their own markets. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, potentially everybody's your customer.
And I don't disagree with what you said either. I don't want any of that either, but it can't stand in our way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I guess that's where, in that everybody who eats could potentially be their customer. So that's where we need local growers to at least leverage those systems. Like social media is something, 20 years ago. It's hard for me to believe it, but 20 years ago was the first year that I worked a full season on a farm. There was no Instagram. There was social. I don't even know if social media, existed in the form that it did. But there are these new things today that local growers need to leverage, right? And it's to reach out to people, make connections, and make their markets. And so that you're right. I mean, that is we can't wait. We can't wait for somebody to go make a law or change a law or something. I mean, that's what this whole conversation has been about. Is how how local growers can do it for themselves and make their own markets and connect with their own customers. And I think that's local growers are really good at that. Scrappy. I just wanted to acknowledge, the playing field is not entirely level.
No, for sure.
And so that's almost like why local growers have to work harder, is because they and I think they enjoy that. I mean, they if
we're all pretty defiant people, or else we wouldn't be doing it. So it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I think of farmers, I think of very independent and would probably rather do all these things for themselves than work for some big huge company where they're part of that and the marketing is all done for them. I mean, hopefully that's what this whole conversation has been about. Like, if people haven't thought of these things, I hope if somebody's out there listening to this, they've taken away at least one thing that they can do. And like for me personally, I'm not good at social media. I was a super late adopter. I didn't have a Facebook account until December of 2015. I had to get one to become the administrator for the Growing for Market Facebook page. That's something I haven't been good on my farm or in my business at Growing for Market. I'm trying, like, on both fronts, I'm trying to do better, right? Because I realize if I'm not doing that, I'm leaving money on the table, right? And so I think, some people, it comes naturally for them they're either good photographers or they like getting in front of the camera, or they're people and like connecting with their audience that way. And so at least I think hopefully, like, on that particular tip, hopefully there's some takeaways here for farmers of how to grow their businesses. And hopefully, if you haven't been proactive on social media and you're at all inclined to do so, give it a shot, because it is a great way. Probably whatever you're growing is probably photogenic. Your customers would love to see it, and it's probably going to help you grow your business.
Something you could do, like when I had my I still have my yoga studio, but like, I really don't like doing social media. Instagram just gives me anxiety. So I had a yogi who loved Instagram, and we traded out. She got free monthly membership and did all of my virtual marketing. And it cost me a membership, but I would have paid somebody more than what a membership was costing.
Well, and if because you have that presence, now you're getting more members, you still made money off of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she moved. I need to find another person to help me out. Like, I could definitely tell a difference when my social media was strong. I got more visibility, and when it kind of went away. But I mean, like,
brilliant.
Reaching out to your people who are at farmers market every single week, who want to support you, and maybe one of them is an amazing photographer and would trade out.
I'm busy, by the way.
Maybe you have a CSA, right? And so you're probably already sending newsletters to those people.
Yeah.
Say, I need marketing help. If anybody in the audience either has those skills or is willing to come out to the farm every other week and take some pictures, we'll trade you a CSA membership for marketing help or something like that.
And I think you'd be surprised how many people would take you up on that.
I want to go back to the notion of that cookbook and the recipes and stuff. You know what else that needs to be in there is basic cooking skills on how to cut a kohlrabi, how to cut leeks, how to cut basil, how to dehydrate these fresh herbs to make them last longer. There's a whole nother skill set beyond the recipes that we can add to this book. And it fills itself out.
So when we're talking about some things some growers are doing to kind of stand out from a marketing approach, I think a good example is, profound microfarms, right? So Jeff does a few things really well. So he's doing on-farm dinners. He's partnering with local chefs to kind of co-brand some of the stuff. So, people that may not be familiar with the farm, maybe they're coming there from the restaurant connection. Restaurants he's selling to, he might be driving traffic towards that. And just that it creates an exciting event that helps the customer identify with that brand, right? They enjoy spending time at the farm. They enjoy, spending money with a brand that they like, that suits their lifestyle. And the other thing, and I think this kind of ties into what Kari was saying a moment ago, about leveraging, with other people, right? So Jeff may have tons of lettuce, but then being able to kind of partner with another farmer that does beef, or another farmer that does, chickens or eggs or so on and so forth is so helpful for kind of diversifying and rounding those things out. And you might not want to go to that market 3 towns away, but that chicken farmer is going to go. Why don't you bring some of their eggs to the market you're going to, and why don't you send some lettuce that way with that?
Yeah, I really like that.
Farmer. And it just, because you can't be everywhere at one time. But Nick, you and I have talked about, taking risks, and there's all kinds of fun things you can do to kind of stand out. One of our teammates, Carl, that works on our customer service team, he's a microgreen grower, goes to market, occasionally doesn't sell all his microgreens at market, may have some leftover. Him and his partner were baking those into dog treats and bringing those into market. And he said they would fly off the shelf. Right. And that makes sense. Like pet lovers, people that want to put good food into their body want to put good food into their pet's body. And so, genius idea with a byproduct that was already on the farm. You can't be afraid to step out a little bit like that.
And dogs never complain about how things taste either. It's great.
Dogs love microgreens.
Another example, right? And this one's close to home for you, Nick, right? You've talked to me about going to market or having a booth or something like that and doing mocktails on site, right? And so a fun little something different, something to stand out, something to generate foot traffic.
The margin's fantastic.
There you go.
It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all really good ideas. I mean, and just the principle of not having any waste. I mean, I get like not every single thing may be able to be salvaged, but another really good example I think applies here that might help people sell more of their fresh product in the first place and then give them a winter product is I worked for a farm that sold a fair amount of culinary herbs. And so she would always over harvest, right? Because the old pilot high and watch it fly, right? Mm-hmm. So she would harvest like twice as much of any of the culinary herbs as she actually thought she would sell. So she had these big bodacious herb displays, and then that way, if people really wanted like parsley or whatever that day, she's got it. She could sell a lot of it. But she, usually like I worked for her for a whole season, right? So usually she did overestimate, right? Because she'd been doing it for a while. She knew how much she was usually going to sell, but they would immediately go into a dryer. Any product that came back to market would immediately go into a dryer. It's shelf stable, sits there, and then when she has time, she crumbles it up and sells dried herbs through the wintertime when it was in a cold area. Yeah. So things like that. Just like little strategies to think about ways of like. I mean, the microgreens and dog treats is a new one for me, but I think thinking about the life cycle of these products and how to deal with product that does come back from market. So it's not just compost. I mean, compost is great, but you make more money on other things. So it's a really good strategy.
I hope we didn't just create a ton of competition for Carl at market.
I think he'll be fine. There's also some off-brand stuff that can happen at the market, and I think you may have a little tale about that, my love.
Yes. So I don't remember how many years ago. I mean, it's been within the last. My son is 5, so it's been within the last 3 years. We went to farmers market and they had like a kind of a kid event that weekend. I want to say it was like Mother's Day or something. So they had kids activities to do for mom and yada, yada, yada. And one thing every booth did I think you remember it now.
No, but I know where
Was
this is going.
they gave suckers at every booth, had those little bonbon suckers.
Dum dum,
Yeah.
dum dum suckers.
Dum Dum, is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Just, in every single booth. Do you want a sucker? Like, no. But then there was one booth that had little things, little cups of blueberries. She didn't sell blueberries. Her family had a blueberry farm. She knew this was coming up. She kind of thought the suckers seem a little off for, the people who are shopping at farmers market probably aren't giving their kids these suckers every day. And now everybody is offering them. She sold goat soap. I had only bought from her once, I think. But after that, like, she gave him a little thing of blueberries. He lost his mind. That was the first time he had blueberries. He loved them. Now we have to keep them. But, I made a point to start buying soap from her much more because everybody else is giving these silly suckers. And she did what a farmer's market should have been having at their booth.
So here's what happens in a small market like this. Small town, downtown committee where we're at, you're in charge of the square and you're in charge of this park and you're in charge of this and you're in charge of that. And you also need to do the farmers markets, which is, by the way, is on a Saturday and you're already working 60 hours a week. I don't blame the person for the mismanagement. I blame that the residents aren't making enough of a stir to make this a priority for the city to go, let's hire a market manager. And before the season starts, let's send this market manager for some farmers market trainings that are available out there. Let's send this farmers market manager to other big markets to see what works, what doesn't. And I don't know, let's ask the farmers what they think about it instead of a meeting in which we go, hey, here's what we're going to do, like it or don't. There's not enough communication between the farmers and what they want. And so when you're trying to do these promotional activities throughout the year that are so disconnected from what the goal of the farmers market is, it puts everybody in a bad position. And I know on this podcast I go on and on about the market, but it's not the person's fault. It's the city has not put a priority on it because the residents have not put enough pressure on the city. And so if we want to have nice things, we have to sometimes demand and ask for them and vote with the dollars. And when something happens, you have to show up for the actual event. So everybody's responsible for this. And soapbox rant over.
Well, it begs a question, and this would be a good one for Andrew, and it might be a little bit of a loaded question, so I'll warn you with that. I've seen some markets where the more the merrier, the bigger the market, the better. You'll have some vendors there with 47 different crop offerings, and then there might be a vendor and all they do is tomatoes, or all they do is corn, or all they do is fresh baked bread. And so some markets are very, very inclusive of more vendors, and some markets are very, very proprietary and say, well, we already have a vendor that does tomatoes. You can't sell tomatoes. We already have a vendor that sells bread. You can't have bread or flowers. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Andrew, or
Boy, I do.
I'm curious. I'm curious to hear them in the sense of, we all want farmers to succeed. We know there's already enough competition out there. Where's the line between trying to be super inclusive and creating more farms, and the line between not jeopardizing the ones that maybe have been going to market for 3 years at that particular market?
I'm happy to just say I think there's a reason that most farmers markets do have vet their vendors, I guess. Just because most of them do it on seniority, and then because if there's every single person selling the same thing, then it's like the whatever that market dollar is, the pie gets sliced up into such small pieces. And so beyond that, I think there's different markets of different sizes in different communities. They just have to do it their own. But I think, right, that's why most markets do. I mean, most markets have a meeting and decide who you have to apply and get in to come, right? What do you think, Nick?
The vetting of the farmers for sure has to happen. We have to go and put eyes on the farm to make sure that it's safe, that it is what they say it's going to be, and that level of transparency. If the farmer themselves are not going to open themselves up on social or open themselves up to events or workshops or something like that on the farm, somebody has to go verify that this is what we say it's going to be. That's the whole purpose of it. The problem I have when we go, oh, we already have 2 tomato vendors, we can't have any more, then what you're doing is you're eliminating from, when I say the market, I don't mean the farmer's market, I mean the market.
Yep.
The ability for somebody to choose and to vote with their dollars. If that new vendor is going to come in and have a fresh take and level everybody up and give these old curmudgeon vendors that have been there for 20 years something to strive for, then it's going to stagnate. And so new blood, especially younger, more motivated, somebody coming at this from a whole different perspective, I would go, we should be so fortunate, anybody, everywhere, to go to a farmer's market that has 6 different tomato vendors doing 12 different varieties each. And now you really get to choose what you're putting on your plate, because not only is it local, not only is it fresh, and not only you're supporting local, but yeah, I'm cooking tomato sauce this week. I need this sandwiches. I need slicers. There's still room to grow for that 2% of the population that we're really trying to get after, that they're not just buying one kind of tomato. They're buying multiple kinds because they cook and they know what to do with it. Not once on this podcast or any other podcast have I ever misrepresented myself in going, I am in this. I am personally in this industry. And thankfully, Bootstrap Farmer allows me to kind of cut loose on the podcast. But I am 100% here to promote farmers making money on their farm. There's all the other reasons to farm, and none of them are more important than that or any less important. But everybody talks about their passion in farming. My passion is I like local farmers making money, hiring people, putting their kids through college, being able to afford health care for themselves, and to take the most honored and most ancient profession outside of hunting and make it something viable and something important. That's why I'm like, the market decides. And when we, as a farmer's market, don't make space for new vendors to come in and shake things up, everybody's at a loss, including the people shopping there, because now you're taking away choices. Conversely, if that is going to happen, it's on that market to not let the government or the person in charge of the market go, you're not going to shut me down. I'm going to go find another route and probably sell more and easier and better anyway. So there is this, the market has to decide, and it's up to the farmer to go, hey, is there even space here for me if I start this farm? You have to figure that out before. And if not, what's your backup plan? What's your backup to the backup? It's your responsibility to make sure that you're farming right. So I get why some markets do that, and sometimes there is a space constraint, but it's a free country, man. Got to get out there.
I think you touched on a good point, and I've always been a proponent too of, we're in it for sustainability, and I think the first rule of having a sustainable farm is being sustainable financially, right? You can't continue to be a good advocate for the environment if you can't make it as a farm, right? But there's something to be said where you drive by some markets and there's 3 tents, and you drive to another market and there's 15 or 30 or 20, right? And so as a consumer, I'm probably going to drive by that market with 3 tents to hit the one with 20, because I know I got more options, and I can buy my carrots and my tomatoes and my lettuce, and they've got this vendor that makes pies that are really good or whatever, right? So there's that delicate balance where you don't want to squeeze out or cannibalize sales, but more vendors is probably going to mean more draw to the market in general, or at least I hope it would. So it's a balancing act, right?
Well, and there's a cautionary tale to be said in that we're talking about farmers working with other farmers or restaurants and anything. I would caution that you don't get too deep in the trenches with somebody, because to Andrew's point earlier, life happens, kids happen, parent maybe gets sick and you have to take care. All these life events, divorces, whatever, affect the farm often to a disastrous detriment. It's been said on here before. And so if you're partnering up with somebody and half of your business is relying on this partnership, know that that's a very fragile thing that can change at any second. Life happens. And so I like it for projects and, hey, we're going to do this project, but just go into every project knowing, hey, this is not going to be the thing that takes us over. There's never one event that changes a farm's life indefinitely. You could have a tornado hit, a grape farmer is going to bounce back. You could have a hugely successful event, it's not going to pay off the farm. But all these little things that you take steps along the way, and sometimes you take a step back. More often than not, you're taking 3 steps forward, and all that aggregated over a long enough timeline is what separates the best from the best. My goal for, obviously, we have a new podcasting setup, and we're doing things a little different around here. My goal with this is I wanted to feel like a farmer had a seat next to Andrew on this, and not having a time restriction on this podcast or this video, however you're consuming it. I'm hoping to bring topics that farmers, even though they're listening to this, if they were here, what kind of things would they be asking themselves? And so in this particular junction, given our history, and we need to shortcut some of the familiarity because we're filming all day long, and I want people to get a sense of who you two are and how this relationship over the years has formed. Me meeting you and then separately meeting you has changed my career for the better and unfounded. And I can't even describe it because I think about it a lot, especially when I was doing State of the Soil and I was coming on here for the first time. I leaned on both of you very heavily as I was navigating Bootstrap Farmer for that first couple of years. And now you're here, and we're still talking, and it's fun. So I have a list of questions just to kind of show people the depth of your careers and how long they've been, and more importantly, all the things that you've seen along the way on other people's farms. So if you don't mind, it's a hot round question, but take your time answering. I would say that, Andrew, this is more for you because I think you've traveled outside of the country more than either one of us. But if there was some type of farming practice in another country that you would like to see U.S. farmers adopt more broadly, what would that be?
I would love to see U.S. farmers be able to specialize a little bit more. And what I mean by that is it seems like in Europe, there's more, even within the small farming world, there's more segmentation. And what I mean by that is that you'll have farmers that are specifically nursery growers and growing most of the starts for their neighbors in the area. I mean, so I'll give you an example. One time I got the pleasure of traveling in France and visited a fairly large market garden there, I think a few acres. And I don't think they started any of their own seedlings. They put an order in with another, when they wanted to plant something, they knew what the lead time was. They put an order in with a neighboring farmer whose specialty was seedlings, and they dropped them off on the day that they needed them. And same thing with like grafting. The grafting is a personal, pet project, passion of mine. I think one of the things that has hindered the uptake of grafting, which I think has huge benefits that hopefully we'll get to, later on, is that not everybody's going to want to do it, enjoy doing it, be able to do it. And so grafting is something that has huge benefits particularly for tomato production, right? And so, but the thing is, if everybody has to do their own grafting, not everybody's going to be great at it. Not everybody's going to want to do it. So not everybody's going to get the benefit of that. And so I thought, grafting has been done since the 70s in the Netherlands. And it's pretty much standard practice in big greenhouses, right? And so I think one of the reasons that smaller greenhouses haven't adopted it as much is that in this country, you have to do it yourself. And so I thought that there would be more specialization as far as there would be people selling regionally grafted plants, because you can actually buy them through the mail. There have been some people who have started businesses sending grafted plants through the mail, but I thought that there would be more like people doing it regionally for their neighbors, kind of like the seedlings, right? Because one of the right now, the point that most local growers are at is of wearing many hats. They're starting their own plants, they're planting them, they're doing their own marketing, they're doing their own sales, they're doing maybe building their own website. It's like they're wearing all the hats, and so I think that would be something that would be great if growers didn't feel like they had to wear every single hat of starting their own plants, of grafting their own plants, and everything. And I don't even know what that is. It might just be that the population is denser. You know, in most of Europe, the population density is much higher, where it's more spread out here. So there may not be the density of, like, you know, farmers in the area to the point to push them to the point where, oh, there's a lot of direct market farmers around here, so maybe I'll specialize in plants. Although that's actually the way that our own farm, via my wife's business, Seedlings by Annie, has gone. You know, should say her. You know, she's specialized in nursery and, you know, sells a lot of retail plants and plants to farmers, right? So I'm not really sure what that is, but I would think it would be a relief for some growers to be able to take off one or two of those hats and, like, specialize with other growers in their areas, and not have to feel like they have to do every single aspect of propagation, you know, starting the seed through growing and selling everything.
Yeah, and look, we're back to the basic fundamentals of what this whole talk has been. You know, if you're not great at marketing, get some help. You know, it's like, I don't know what this thing is that farmers do that we have to take on everything that has to go on the farm.
Right.
And I would think that if most people heard, hey, somebody else is going to start your seeds, boy, that's just an avalanche of, well, what if that, and what if this, and, you know, what if it's a lot better? Specializing in it, and they have the proper germ chamber, and they're helping you select the seeds a little bit better. I mean, that's crazy thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Randy, as you've had your travels to many other farms prior to Bootstrap, I'm sure that you've seen some things that farmers have adopted along the way, and it could be anything, but I know that you've had some aha moments in your travels over the years. What's a couple of just tales that you can tell from back in the day of, you know, I went to this farm, I had XYZ assumption, and I walked away completely mind blown?
When I first started working for Johnny's and visiting farms, I was blown away in one particular scenario where the sales rep for Canada and I was their sales support. We went on some customer visits. We had some downtime. We had saw someone on our list that you know, bought $1,000 worth of seed, but we hadn't planned on dropping in and seeing them. And it turns out it was one particular pepper variety. On our route, we decided to just swing by that farm and just say hi because they were on our way. And when we pulled in, we saw dump trucks rolling out of that farm full to the top of peppers. We saw trailer after trailer after trailer of housing for woofers and migrant labor and whatnot. And I think the moral of the story here is, like, how blown away how our assumptions of this might be a smaller account, but we'll see them on the way by was deceiving. And there was a whole lot more going on at that particular operation than we had any idea. You never know what that looks like in relationships, in, you know, a particular account. You know, if you're dealing with a restaurant, or I'd say, you know, kind of keep an open mind that you don't know where that big next opportunity is going to be coming from. So it doesn't hurt to, you know, put some feelers out and explore or tiptoe into them. I've been in operations where picked up a little, you know, little tricks, right? Where a grower would roll up the sides on their hoop house at the beginning of the day, and they'd turn their water on. And on that water spigot, you know, was a clothespin. And they'd hook it to their shirt, you know, and
That's so smart.
you know, and then you get pulled to another area of the farm and you realize, oh, I've had that water on for the last 2 hours, you know, and you run back and you turn off the valve, put that clothespin back, and you realize some of those little processes.
And that happened because he did that more than once. Just like every farmer I know of has left the water on overnight.
Yep. So, you know, there's all kinds of really interesting things from just going to a farm and saying, like, this is a problem and here's how this particular farmer solved it. And I think the message there is there's so much value in farmers networking with other farmers. And for the most part, most of them are an open book. They want you to succeed. It's sad that there are some out there that are very proprietary and they're overly worried about competition, and they would never want to share a quality of life hack for their farm if it gives another farm a leg up. But I think we need to get past that. I think the more farms that succeed, the better. The more customers we can all bring in, the way we can kind of shift that paradigm of what we're eating and what we're putting into our bodies. It's going to take everyone's effort. And I think groups like one that comes to mind, the Practical Farmers of Iowa, is a fantastic group that does a great job of new members of the group get mentored by seasoned growers. They really do a great job of networking and allowing farmers to share equipment, maybe share land, share best practices, and take a new farmer under their wing and helping them succeed. And I think that's so important. And we need to kind of push that mindset.
Andrew, pretty much the same question. I mean, given the volume of successful farmers you talk to, I mean, there's got to be at least one good little nugget of you being able to walk away from a farm visit going, man, it's going to change how I do your own operation, or something like you can pass on.
Yeah, sure. I can give you something that changed my perspective on farming. So there's one moment that I remember that really did change mine. And I think, I should say that preceded by saying that I think one of the ways that I came by my greenhouse obsession is that I grew up in Virginia outside of Washington, D.C., and then we started our farm in Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Maine, right? And so it's totally different climate. Virginia, Pennsylvania, great tomato growing areas. I also have a tomato obsession, right? And so we basically all of a sudden...
That's the biggest understatement I've heard.
Well, you know me, Nick, and
I do.
Our audience may not be as familiar, so it's kind of stating the obvious there. But so basically, I found myself farming all of a sudden in a climate that wasn't very friendly to my tomato obsession, and so that's really part of the reason that I got so interested in greenhouses. And I remember going to visit this one greenhouse one time that it's cold and nasty outside, maybe spitting a little bit of snow. We go inside, it's nice and warm. They've got speakers actually rigged up throughout the greenhouse. They're playing nice music, and everybody's just like working away in this nice climate. And it blew my mind a little bit. And that even if greenhouses and tomatoes aren't your obsession, it showed me you can make your farm whatever you want it to be, right? So maybe greenhouses aren't your thing, but I mean, that definitely, I think that I walked through a door that day, of like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to work in greenhouses. So maybe your thing is driving tractors, maybe your thing is not machinery, like whatever. The point is like, we've been talking about how I think people get into farming because they're independently minded and things like that. And that's one of the values of farming, is that like any small business, you can, keep in mind, you can make it your own. You don't have to follow anybody else's exact formula, but you can pick and choose and take the best of things that you see on other people's farms. And life is short. Make sure and make your business something that you're going to enjoy. And so if working in a nice environment, listening to the music that you picked is the thing, it's up to you to figure out how to make your business so you can do that. And if just like being out in the quiet and being in nature is what you'd prefer, like make it so.
I'm glad you share that, because one of the things I always like to say, and I don't think we mentioned it enough about greenhouses, is like, if it's comfortable for you, it's going to be comfortable for the plants, and vice versa. And why would you want to put yourself in a position where you're cold and wet all the time, every day, every second on the farm? It's just it's a nice break to be inside there, especially this time of year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is going to be to both of you, and whoever wants to start first can just jump in. But what's the most challenging decision you've had to make in your farming and the servicing of the farming industry for the both of you? what's the most challenging decision you've had to make? And would you change what you did whenever that decision was made?
Like, I personally don't have a farming operation, but I've worked with a lot of farmers, right? And I think one of the most difficult decisions they can make is of a practical one. There are things that make your farm sustainable from an income perspective, and we talk about being diverse and making big risks, taking big risks, but I think it's sometimes that difficult decision is knowing when to walk away from a particular method or a particular crop. You know, your farm may have been in the family for 20 generations as a corn farm, but that might not be the solution in 2024. And so that can be a hard decision to make, to say, maybe we need to be a radish farm, or maybe selling to at the roadside stand isn't, working out for us anymore, or maybe we have a difficult employee and it's best for the farm if we, let them go. And so I think some of it is reevaluating at the end of the day what's working and not working, and not being afraid to make a change.
Yeah, I think that's good. Actually, what I have to say is in the same vein, is that over the years, our farm has changed a lot. And I think that one of the hardest decisions has been to specialize to a certain degree. So, to let you know what that's looked like for us is that I think like a lot of young farmers, we started out really diverse, growing almost all the vegetable crops in the seed catalog. Also, we had chickens and we had an egg business, and have actually had other various types of livestock. We've raised pigs, and like when I think about it, we've done almost all the things over the years. And so, I mean, that's an interesting question actually, because it makes me realize how much I really have doubled down on the things like I've that not only I was interested in, but also ended up being profitable. Because I think, and I hope this is useful for your audience, particularly the younger farmers, because I think a lot of people see the whole range of things that you can do in farming and try to do it, like grow all the crops and also some livestock. Like, like also like we have a lamb that got rejected by its mom, so it's living in the kitchen now. And, it's like, and I think passion is not enough to keep you in business. You also have to be making some money, and I'm talking market farming, where we're trying to run a farm and make a profit. Because what I realized is that we were so darn diversified, we weren't really doing any one of the things really well. It wasn't more that we weren't doing them well. We were doing them well. It's just some of the things, we just went into it with this idea of like, we'll grow produce and we'll have eggs and maybe some livestock.
Which are vastly different skill sets, all of them.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, and part of it was that we had worked on farms that had done all those things. And then when we started doing them, like for example, when we moved to our current farm location, that was the plan, was to do vegetables and also have, I mean, we had, 250 or more hens at one point. We had more than 250 because we had to have replacement. We grew, we got our own chicks. And so we had, hundreds of chickens at a time. People told us when we moved where we are, they told us, we've seen other people try to do eggs. And I mean, you got to be sensitive to your local dynamics. Like one of the things about where I live in Cornville, Maine, it's in central Maine, very rural. And so I think, two things that are going on is a lot of people put as much stock in things being local as being organic. Oh yeah, and so we wanted to do organic eggs. People were like, well, we've seen other people try to do organic and fail. And we were like, no, we're going to be the ones who do it. And one of the dynamics there is that the organic feed cost almost, at least when we were doing it, the organic feed cost almost twice as much as the conventional feed. And so, living in a rural area as we did, there are a lot of people who had backyard flocks, when they had extra eggs, they would put them out, the sign out by the road, local eggs, $2, $2.50 or something like that. I mean, with inflation, it's probably gone up by now. But basically, we essentially had competition from a bunch of other people who were doing it as a hobby, and people didn't really prioritize the fact that our eggs were certified organic enough to come to pay the price that we were asking. And we tried everything. We tried buying in bulk. We bought this little silo that we put in our barn. We would get bulk deliveries of feed. We tried raising the price until we destroyed demand. So we tried all the things to make our eggs profitable. It was definitely a paradigm shift for me to go from like, oh, we're gonna do all these little enterprises, and it was just very frustrating to realize how much work we were doing. Some of it was profitable, and some of it wasn't. And we also had sheep. Like, I remember this one time we had sheep that we were rotationally grazing, moving them every day during the summertime when the grass was growing, right? And I have just this like one memory of being out there one day, moving the sheep, looking up at the hill at my greenhouses, that were actually making money, and thinking like,
where you actually wanted to be.
That's where I want to be, and that's where we're actually making money. And thinking like, why the out here moving these sheep that were like, I don't know, like maybe breaking even, maybe not profitable. And so that's something I see so many people who start out in farming making that same mistake. And that's why I'm bringing it up now, because I feel like it's a very common mistake to make, to be like, I want to grow one of everything in the seed catalog, and we're going to do vegetables and eggs and also livestock, and also do some value added goods. And it's like, pick one thing. My advice particularly for young growers or people who are really diversified and having trouble making ends meet is figure out what is actually making a profit on your farm. Double down on that. And once your farm is profitable, maybe then diversify out into other stuff. But you have to have the basis of profitability before you go doing all these other things that may or may not be profitability. So part of it is what you like to do, but part of it is also having enough of something that's actually profitable to keep the whole business in business.
Can't think of a better way to end it. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew risked life and limb driving up from Houston. So I think the least we could do is leave a comment below of what you took away from this. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Growing for Market Magazine was a key part of my success since day one. Why don't you go through a little bit of where Growing for Market is now in a 60-second sub-elevator pitch, and why should people subscribe other than it was heavily endorsed by yours truly?
Well, that's a great reason. Well, this is actually an exciting time for us because 2024 is the beginning of the 34th year of the publication of Growing for Market. So it was started by Lynn Basinski, who people may know. She wrote the book, The Flower Farmer, which has launched a lot of flower farming careers. But Growing for Market is how we learned to farm too. All the farms that we apprenticed on got it, but what it is 10 times a year, it is knowledge from other farmers. I think that's the most important thing I'd want to pass on to people, is that we have a ever-changing cast of writers. It is not the same people over and over again, and all of our writers are actual farmers. And so typically it's somebody talking about what they're doing on their farm, a particular crop that they're really good at growing, a marketing tactic that has worked for them, a business skill that will help keep people in business. And so Growing for Market is an actual paper magazine, right? Because it started back in 1992 before there were digital magazines. You can choose to either get the paper subscription or digital, or you can get both. But 10 times a year, we have a magazine that comes out with tips from other farmers. And it's really the only magazine that is focused solely on market farmers. And we always have vegetable growing information. We always have flower growing information, because we feel like those two things are really the pillars of market farming. And one thing that we just added recently is a free month, right? Because people want to email us, we'll send you a free copy. But even better is you can just go sign up at the website. You'll get a month free. If you decide it's not for you, cancel it within the first month and you never even get billed. But it's a great way. So, I'm here telling people about it. Go see for yourself. Go subscribe. And if you decide you don't like it, you got a month to decide, and you'll never even get billed. You'll get a copy in the mail and all that kind of stuff. And there's 1,700 articles in our archive online, and there's also 10 years of back issues. So even the cheapest subscription, $39 a year, the cheapest subscription gets you access to 10 years of digital back issues. So there's more than anyone could possibly read in a year available online. it's just a great resource. The reason we do it is because we want to see local farmers succeed.
Right on. And then again, I mentioned it. This is required reading for anybody that is. Hopefully, you're getting this before you have a hoop house to help you select what you need. But if you're interested in how to run your hoop house, we're going to get into it in the next episode. But this is a fantastic book and it's so funny because I knew you before you took over Growing for Market. I knew you before this, and I was kind of around as you were writing this, and I know what you put into it, or I have an idea what you put into it through our conversations. But it is you got to get it. So. Thank you for coming up. Thank you for sitting on tarmac for 4 hours yesterday. And thanks for walking across the street. It was good seeing you again. And we're going to go have lunch, and then we're going to podcast until we can't podcast no more while everybody's here. So there'll be more episodes coming up. The next one, we're going to talk about hybrid seeds and how that's different from GMO and kind of dispel some of the myths. Like and subscribe. Follow Growing for Market. Call and talk to Randy and order something. Have a good night.